Rick Hansen on Amazing Greats with Brandon Bakke, sharing lessons from the bench.
From the heart to the mic, on the field, on the stage, faith in they step as they turn the next page. Athletes, actors, musicians, authors, and more, sparking the flame, lifting up Jesus unashamed of his name. Life stories of struggle, redemption, and grace. Victory is rising from a broken place. Legends of life with a purpose to show how God shows up when you let him flow. Amazing grace, shining bright, living the faith in the spotlight. Hearts on fire, now let it go. Turn it up, it's time to start the show.
Well, okay, here we are on a sunny Northwest afternoon. Me being in the Northwest, and my guest today happens to be from the Northwest as well. Brandon Bakke is our guest, and he is a tremendous guy, but on top of that, a tremendous author. Let me tell you, Brandon, your book was so good. It was like one story after another story, and every story kind of told the lessons of the book. And the book is called Lessons from the Bench. And you spent much of your playing career as a bench player. And that's where this whole journey begins, where the book begins, and where we're going to begin our story here. But first, I've got a couple of warm-up questions for you. Number one is, you played for this guy named, and this is a big part of your book as well, Jerry Tarkanian. Coach, he's legendary. He's controversial in some ways. But most people who know basketball know that name and know his legend. And so I want your inside scoop on what kind of guy this guy was. Was he intense? Was he humorous? Fill us in on that man, Jerry Tarkanian.
Yeah. Well, first, Rick, thank you so much for having me on. I've enjoyed listening to the podcast, and so it means a lot to have the opportunity to speak to you and anyone who happens to be listening. Yeah, I was very blessed my senior year in college I was at Fresno State University, and all of a sudden, Jerry Tarkanian gets hired to be my coach in my senior year. And at the time, if we went back in time, and Jerry Tarkanian was the biggest name in basketball. Yeah. He was featured in Hollywood movies and, famous for sucking on his towel and Tark the Shark and all of that. And with him, a whole just crazy environment that he brought with him. He was famous for being the coach at UNLV, and it kind of felt like he brought Las Vegas to Fresno and the glitz and glamour. He was not what I expected. Which is a lot of what I write about in the book. I think Coach Tarkanian really showed this average bench guy that I was, that he believed in me. He gave me some opportunities that I had to work really hard for, and he put me into some pretty incredible spots and key moments in games with few seconds to go where I hadn't played at all, and believed in me. And, that says a lot about who he was. He's a very loyal man who really set up some opportunities for me after I graduated. So I can't speak highly enough about Coach Tarkanian. I know we all have flaws, and we all have, the things we struggle with. And he, sometimes those are celebrated a little bit more when you're in the spotlight like he is. But that guy believed in me, and I'm eternally grateful.
Perfect. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to know, and you highlighted a lot of that in the book. But to just hear it from your mouth, and some of those inside stories is great. So, a little bit about you. You've been an administrator, a teacher, a coach for over 30 years, and yet you don't even hardly look 30 years old. So.
Yeah, it's going to catch up to me at some point. I hear you. Yeah. I'm 29 years in education this year, which really gives me a really interesting and unique perspective writing. I see athletes and parents struggle with this idea that they're a bench player, that they're not the starter or the star. And I've watched it, and it as a bench player myself, I just finally felt compelled, who got very, that was a struggle. My story, a lot in the book, is about my journey to find purpose and understanding with the importance of that role and self-worth, to be honest with you. And I just felt like perhaps I had something to offer in that space. And I've been very lucky to be surrounded by some pretty incredible guys who, have gone on to do some amazing things in sports and at the professional level, who also were bench players. And I got to kind of share a little bit about those guys as well in this story. So yeah, I'm really thankful to be working with kids every day and hoping I can help in some way.
Absolutely, that's great. And let's jump back to get a little context on you,
Yeah.
on
Yeah. Thank you.
Brandon Bakke. Your faith story started at a very young age. And you were an intense guy. I mean, I saw in the book where you said, I think it was the book that you said you started journaling at 3 years old or something like that. It was like crazy. But tell us your faith journey as a kid. Where was all of that at for you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my testimony, I've always felt, is not strong. I've always been kind of ashamed of my testimony in a way, because I came to know the Lord as a 5-year-old. My dad is a pastor. I'm a PK, and my mom and dad just were able to spark a love for Christ, and that I was an early adopter, if you will, and I stayed faithful. I didn't have that story of the Paul to Saul, miraculous conversion, if you will. I've been fairly steady in my faith, thankfully, and I'm kind of ashamed by it because it's not real glamorous. I envied sometimes people that could tell those really incredible conversion stories, if you will, where their life was so dramatically changed, and mine has not been that. I've learned, and I get encouraged by some of those people, that my testimony is an important one, especially for parents who are trying to raise their kids in the faith, and hoping that maybe I can be encouraged some of those folks. Sure.
Yeah, and I love those stories too, because I get them on this podcast all the time. And those amazing moments and people where they made the flip, and it's incredible. That's not my story either, but my story's not yours either, because I was I really came to faith about 10-12 years ago, but it wasn't in any miraculous, opening of the sky and this amazing thing. So I kind of had the same story. It's just kind of like I got the bug, started digging a little deeper. I'm kind of a skeptic kind of guy and needed proof. So I was looking for all right. But anyway, let's get jumping into the book. I mean, that was such a great read. And, I am honestly not a sports guy. Okay. I was kind of expecting to be a little bored by it, but every little step along the way, it showed in sports how those sports stories resonated in all kinds of ways, in all kinds of career goals and all of that. So I was not a basketball player. I was a wrestler in high school. And so the only thing that I know about basketball is they got bigger crowds in the gym than we did. And that was a little disturbing. So tell us about the first and probably the most important thing, and maybe the theme throughout the book is this whole concept of me-ism. Explain to us what me-ism is, and how a person gets past it. Let's start with just what is it?
Well, and especially with our Christian context here, I think it's an important topic. I think in our society especially, and it's interesting because the Bible is littered with this idea that we're about ourselves, and that we need to break through that to truly appreciate others and life, and ultimately be able to have a relationship with Christ. And I think it's even harder now, though. We live in a society that is all about me, and that makes it very hard to be a part of a team in any context, whether it's a sports team or in a business or organization. To be a part, to submit to other people and in an organization, is tough. I joke with people that YouTube should be called Me Too, because that's what we are shown is the way to go about this thing in life. So what I talk about in the book is just, I was no different as a 19, 20-year-old on a Division I basketball scholarship, trying to find my way in college basketball. I was about myself. And it wasn't until, and yet I was coming off the bench, which was the struggle. And it wasn't until I was able to break through that, where I could, we talk about like the we before the me. That's a old trope in athletics, but it's true. Until I was able to understand that this was really about the team, and I wasn't able to find a way that I could help us be successful, because that's really what the book's about, Rick. It's about how bench players help teams win. And I needed to know that because I wanted to be important. I wanted to feel like I had value. And so, you can't find, and my contention is you really can't find your role in helping the team be successful until you overcome me-ism.
Brandon Bakke is the author of the book Lessons from the Bench, and he shares his stories and his ideas from the book on Amazing Greats. And as a young man and a Christian young man, were there prayers that make me a starter? Dear God, why am I on the bench?
No, not. I can honestly tell you, no, Rick. I think my dad, I shared, was a pastor, and he really ingrained in me that I needed to play with purpose, that I had and he had me identify that. And my purpose was to make a positive impact on the community and the people in the athletic department, but most importantly, my teammates. And when I was initially struggling, not getting the playing time I wanted, or not hearing my name, getting announced for making the big shots or whatever in those early years, I had to get grounded back to my purpose. Like, why was I there? And I had kind of an awakening, to be honest with you. I was confronted by our athletic trainer of all people, who was like, your attitude is terrible. We thought you were going to be about the team, and you're not. And it was his challenge. His name was Ed Ferreira, that really opened my eyes to who I really was at the time. And it's not who I wanted to be.
Yeah. And I love that story when I read it in the book about him. And he's a trainer, but he made the impact on you. And there's maybe a bit of your aha moment is to kind of come around and take, remove that me-ism about yourself. But me-ism has not been helped at all by the change in the rules of the NCAA in July of 2021, when they changed the rules that the players could use their name and their image and their likeness for personal gain and for financial gain, quite frankly. And that kind of took a spin, maybe for the worst in athletics. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I'm not. I certainly don't like college athletics right now, to be honest with you, which hurts me to say. I also think that athletes should be allowed to benefit from their name and image and likeness. I remember, when I was in college, Rick, I would go around. I was speaking a lot at churches and FCA huddles, and trying to do some good. And any other student at Fresno State could have got paid to do that. I could not, because I was an athlete. And that kind of double standard sometimes is what I think has led to where we're at now. That said, where I do think it has caused a whole heck of a problem is it throws that spotlight back on, this is all about me.
Yeah.
And so how hard is it to build a team where everybody can embrace their role? Bench players alike. If the next year I'm moving on to another school where I can get paid, or I can be the star, if you will. So that makes it really hard. Coach Drew at Baylor, who I write about quite a bit in the book, a really strong man of faith, he talks about how it's different when you're sort of coaching now in a dating relationship than in a marriage. And you just don't have that long-term commitment. So yeah, it's a real challenge.
So you had an interesting interaction with Trent Dilfer in the early days. You're talking about you just mentioned the FCA. That's the what the actual
Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Yeah. And I have a good friend of mine who is really involved in that, George Tolles. I don't know if you ever remember him, but he's been around forever. Anyway, tell me the Trent Dilfer story and your relationship with him back. This was in Fresno.
The way I got to Fresno, to be quite honest with you, I went on my recruiting trip to Fresno State, didn't know anybody down there. And on the visit, I remember calling my father and saying, Dad, I haven't met anybody on my trip who I think is a Christian, at least far as I know. And my dad says, "Oh, I'm sorry, Brandon, to hear that, because that was an important part of my life." And then I said, I actually think this is exactly where I need to be. And so when I got down there, that was my mindset for when I was at my best. That was my mindset, that I was there for a purpose, to encourage others, serve others, perhaps be a light for others. And it was in that time that Trent Dilfer, who, for those who don't know, Trent was a star quarterback, the sixth pick in the NFL draft, Super Bowl winning quarterback. And he had just become a Christian at Fresno State. Well, he had one of those miraculous conversions that we talked about earlier. And I happened to just we had a class together, and we knew of each other but hadn't met. And I got inserted into his life at that time to just be a solid friend, somebody who had been a quote unquote strong Christian for a while, and he didn't really know what that looked like. And I was just there to be a model of consistency for him, and help him kind of find a new community where he could really grow in his faith. So Brett and I, at that point, decided that we wanted to try to increase our reach at the university. And so we kind of raised some money and got some churches involved. And we started these outreach dinners across from the university, where we would invite like hundreds of athletes to come once a month, get fed, which was a big part of the draw, and then hear a message. And it was really incredible time in Fresno, where there were hundreds of athletes who, came to follow the Lord as a result of those seeds that we were planting back then together, Trent and I. So yeah, really incredible to see what he's done in his life, no doubt.
Yeah, and I want to connect with you a little later in the conversation about how Trent had a great relationship with Matt Hasselbeck, his competitor for the quarterback position of the Seahawks at one point. But let's jump first into the lessons themselves. There are 9 of them in the book, and there's I don't know if we need to ramble off every one of them, because when they buy the book, they will have an opportunity to find all of that. But one of them was about relationships. And the relationships that you had even as far back as Puyallup High School, a high school here in Washington State. You had friends then that you still have today, and it was largely because of these relationships that developed back in the day. Some of those people were Damon Heward, Brock Heward, Ryan Carr, and others. Were there others that we might know? Because Ryan was also a guest on the show. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I did know that. Yeah. And you had RJ Barshon not too long ago, and he's a Puyallup guy, a friend of mine. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Puyallup, all roads lead to Puyallup, I guess, in some ways, right? We do say it's the largest city in the nation that starts and ends with a P, Rick. So there you go. Chris Egan, a lot of people in the Northwest know Chris Egan, the kind of one of the many faces of King 5 Sports, who brings joy into everybody's lives, who he touches. Dane Looker, I wrote about in the book, who is an NFL wide receiver. He hails from Puyallup as well, and all of these guys have in common the premise behind the book. They all were bench players. In fact, I kind of start the book, Rick, with all of us have been bench players in some context in our life. And those guys, were very visibly bench players, and I get to share kind of those behind the scenes stories of how they navigated that and just made a big difference in the teams and organizations they were serving.
And you still see them and communicate with them on a regular basis even today, right?
Yeah, well, Brock, as you know, Brock wrote the foreword for the book, and I was telling you, Rick, before we went live here, that Brock. His episode on your show really is a companion piece to this one, because My senior year, I actually moved to Puyallup. Bethany Baptist Church was the local church here in Puyallup, and they had been courting my dad, Lowell Bakke is his name, to come be their pastor. And he said no, like multiple times, and they wouldn't give up. And he finally was like, maybe I need to listen to where, they feel God's leading them. So he came out, and sure enough, he decides to move our family out our senior year. And when we moved out, I got inserted into the life of Damon Heward. Brock was Damon's younger brother, and he was my brother's age. And the youth pastor at my dad's church, where he was pastor, actually led Brock to the Lord. And the small group that in your podcast with Brock, he shared how he had an accountability group with two other boys and their youth pastor for 4 years all through high school. One of those other boys, Eric, was my younger brother. And so Brock and I have just been connected ever since through my family moving to Puyallup and the blessings that they bestowed on me and vice versa into their family. So, and Brock's the kind of guy, and Damon as well, they never forget where they came from. They never forget the people that they have been with and battled with. And so Brock's an incredible guy, and yeah, very grateful he's in my life.
Fighting me-ism and other important life lessons from author Brandon Bakke. There was another connection with the Northwest in basketball, and this was just mentioned briefly in your book, but I picked up on it because he was another guest on our show here, and that was Fred Kroll and the NBC basketball camps.
Yeah,
you were a coach at that time, right, in Spokane?
Yeah. NBC is a Christian basketball camp that started out here in the Washington area, kind of blew up all over, from California to the Northwest. And Fred mentored a lot of young Christian coaches and those who were still kind of trying to figure life out. And there's a whole generation of people my age that kind of were challenged by Fred and NBC to really grow in their faith and taught us kind of how basketball and our athletic world can they can become the same thing. Like we can, and by the way, Fred was one of the toughest people I've ever met. And that was another aspect of what I came to believe, like being a Christian doesn't mean that we're not tough and that we're not battling and competing hard. And yeah, so Fred made a big impact on so many of us. Really thankful for him.
And that's where you met Trevor Moawad, right?
Yeah. Trevor Moawad and I crossed paths. Trevor was most famously Russell Wilson's mental coach. And Trevor wrote a book called Neutral Thinking, which has really had a powerful impact on a lot of people. And I met him there. He happened to name drop me a little bit in his book, which I was really humbled by. But he really has had a big impact on me and how I approached mentally navigating the adversity that comes and the challenge that comes from not being, the star.
Yeah, and that's what he became, really, is a mental coach for other athletes as well as Russell Wilson, as you'd mentioned. But now he got cancer and passed away a few years ago, right? 2 or 3 years ago.
That's correct. Yeah.
And that had to be hard for you and all of the people that he touched in life, for sure. You didn't write about this guy, but I'm interested in your take on him, Sam Darnold, who is not exactly a bench player, but he had bench playing seasons in his life. Yeah. And he still kind of carries himself as a bench player. What's your thoughts about Sam?
In the book, one of the bench lessons that you referred to, 9 lessons from the bench. And one of them is the bench is a gift. And I say that because I think life, and this is something that I see every day working with high school students, life is about adversity. It is about overcoming adversity. And athletics is kind of this sandbox, this training ground where you can fail and screw up and hit really hard challenges, but it's not life and death. It's not, and where in life do you get that to be able to screw up to that degree and not have it, ruin your life, if you will. And I do think that's one of the challenges that parents sometimes face is we want to naturally remove those challenges. I say in the book, like we want to teach our kids to climb the mountain, not remove the mountain. And athletics does that. It allows us that chance to overcome hard things. Sam is a great example of that. Sam went through a really tough, he was a star, gets to the NFL, gets humbled tremendously, failure after failure. People, famously just doubting him. And he just seemed to handle that the right way. I've never met Sam, but I marvel at him this year and how humble he has stayed through that, which I think is one of the gifts of the bench, is that it humbles you and allows you to handle success in perhaps a different way than maybe some who haven't.
For sure. And that was my take on it too. And that's what I wanted to kind of get you. He's really quite the humbled Super Bowl champion. So yeah, he was great.
Yeah,
so
a real inspiration, no doubt. Yeah.
Let's talk about goals. There's a couple of different kinds of goals that you identify, and both of them are important. The destination goals and the journey goals. Kind of tell us your story behind each of those and the value of each of those for the athlete.
In the book, there is a few chapters where I really lean in on coaches. I think coaches, me being one of them, struggle sometimes with the bench. It's one of the more complex and more challenging things as a head coach, is to keep everybody engaged and involved and finding their value and their importance. I talk just about the importance of process. That's another thing. The Seattle Seahawks, you mentioned Sam Darnold, that their Coach McDonald, did such a great job of this year. Is he really focuses on the process of getting better, those daily habits, routines, not necessarily the end goal in mind. It's more about what we do each and every day. That's what I referred to as the process goal. I think as people and in organizations, we should have a process focused goal to help us zero in on the behaviors that we want to see, those routines, those systems that really help us find success and hopefully meet the end target. That said, I also think we should have that audacious, really ambitious goal. And, in football terms, since we're talking about the Seahawks, their goal is certainly to win the Super Bowl. I think all of us in our roles and our team should have that big goal we're chasing. But more importantly, again, back to the bench concept, is I need to know how I can help our team in my role meet that big challenge, that big destination focused goal. And I think that's where we fall short sometimes, is the bench player especially. Like, what do I do? What do I do that's helping us? I'm not the one who's out scoring all the points here, but I need to know it explicitly. How am I helping us reach that goal? And once you know that, my experience is it really gave me the purpose that I was searching for, as a player wanting to find value.
Yeah. And how can that translate to spiritual goals, faith goals?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually think it, our daily walk as a Christian, I think sometimes, let me ask you, Rick, have you ever set a New Year's resolution? Are you a resolution guy?
Kind of. Yes.
I think a lot of us are, right? And what happens? We set a goal, and then most of us eventually fail. We don't hit the goal. And then we didn't make the goal, and we start over with something, a new goal.
Yeah.
Well, what if instead, like a great example that I use with teachers a lot is we talk about maybe the goal that we want to set is to do a better job with relationships with our students this year. That's my goal. Great. I put it up on the board. I write it down. I want to be better relationally. But what if instead of, focusing that much on the goal, we focus more on the process? What am I going to do each day to help me improve my relationships with my students? And in our faith, it's the same way. What am I doing each day to work on my relationship with Christ? I think focusing more on the process has a direct connection to what it means to be walking with the Lord. And I think when I've struggled in my life, I think that's why I've lost sight of the process and need to get re-grounded back into those daily behaviors.
Rick Hansen with Brandon Bakke and his book of life lessons to be a strong leader, even from the bench. Is there a way to calculate the daily progress? I mean, is there a way to say, if I do this, this, and this today, then I've made progress? or is it more vague than that? I'm guessing so.
Yeah.
If I say my prayers this morning and then do blessings over each meal, is that a process goal, or is
Yeah, no,
there's
I
that
mean,
not?
I think no, I don't think Christianity is a formula. I think sometimes as parents we struggle with that. Like we're kind of taught sometimes in Christian circles that if A plus B equals C, if I do this with my child, then they're going to end up like this. And unfortunately, that's not how it works. Like the Bible is filled with stories of failure and struggle, and it's not a perfect. My dad always says that God works in the and he doesn't work in the perfection, that he's working in the chaos. And I think that, but I do think, the more that we are interfacing with God each day, sure, we're going to see, fruit of that, no doubt. But I don't think it's a formula. I don't think, if you miss a prayer at the meal, like, I think we're okay. But I do think daily habits and routines, time with the Lord. I have a thing in my life. Every day I cross the Narrows Bridge. I've made a point when I hit that bridge every day, whoever's on my mind, I'm gonna pray for. So I try to put, those, when this happens, then I'm going to do this, to have it trigger in my mind so that it's always on the front of my mind. And that's hard to do when, the rest of life starts to overwhelm us.
Well, and I got to ask, are you still journaling after being a early journaler? Is that a part of your routine?
I think that's another process for sure that we talked about. Yeah, I've had great seasons of life where I've journaled. Admittedly, right now I am not in one of them, but all through college, yeah, certainly. For much of you mentioned my youth, like I had a pretty great teacher who kind of like had us journaling every day. And what a gift to be able to go back and look at some of those things and be reminded of who you were, and sometimes be confronted with, did who I want to be, is that who I am right now? So yeah,
Yeah.
super healthy
Yeah, there's
process.
a pastor that I kind of follow. He does a lot of YouTube stuff, and he John Mark Comer. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he has his book is called Practicing the Way,
Okay.
and then as a part of that, he calls it spiritual disciplines, and those are the disciplines that you kind of track, if you will, on a daily basis. And they
Mm.
might be and they're not, like you say, it's not as regimented as how many times I'm going to run laps, or some kind of more calculatable endeavor. But it is, it's helped me because I can lose sight too. I can go days without, unless I kind of just bring myself to what are my disciplines. What am I
Yeah.
doing today, right? So that's cool. Thank you for tracking that in terms of spirituality. That's great.
Yeah.
So you have been working with young people for decades,
Yeah.
and I'm really curious, and I ask people who have had that opportunity and that challenge, what their thoughts about young people today. Are you sensing that there's with the Gen Zs, that there is spirituality that's growing, or not necessarily, or do you see that floating away and not being a good and a decent part of somebody's life these days?
Yeah. I think it's a really difficult time to be growing up. I think this generation gets a bad rap sometimes. I have seen some of the most incredible selfless acts by young people over the last 10 years that are truly inspiring to me. I also think students now, like when you and I were growing up, we did not have social media. I've got a chance to speak to educators all over the country the last 3 years, and I've asked every one of them who are in a kind of our age group who didn't have social media, how many of you wished you would have had social media when you were growing up? And I have yet to find one single person who says yes. And that's what our kids are dealing with, and all that comes with that, which is directly related to the mental health crisis that so many kids are dealing with. Yeah, so I do think that across the country, more and more kids are kind of turning to find a solution to that in their lives. So yeah, I do think that there's a kind of a spiritual awakening happening with that generation right now. Yeah.
Do you have an opportunity to? I know that given the role that you have, you're not, supposed to bring your religion into the school. But
Yeah. Right.
do you have a sense for Young Life's impact on your students, or any of the youth
Yeah.
organizations?
Rick, my grandfather, when I was a kid, he told me once, he said, Brandon, the greatest thing that you could ever say to anybody about God is to not have to say anything at all. And yeah, I work in the public schools. I don't talk about my faith. In fact, my book is not a quote unquote Christian book, because I've always wanted my faith to be just lived out in my actions and how I treat people. Hopefully, they feel loved and cared about, and that my actions can be my testimony, if you will. And so that's been my approach in the public school. I do see just great community work happening, and there's just a lot of incredible organizations, adults and churches and peers. They just seem to be very open to what's going on in each other's lives, which
Yeah.
is fun to watch.
Yeah, I've had an opportunity to connect with Dan Brown, who at your school, who heads up a thing called Interact, which is
Mhm.
students who go out in the community and do good things,
Mhm.
basically. And I
Mhm.
walked into his class one time. I do a thing called Night to Shine here in Gig Harbor, and I walked into his class to tell them about this. It's an early morning class. It's before class. It's a I guess more of a club, but
Yeah.
I was amazed. This big art room is filled to standing room only with these kids who are there ready to do something for their community and rather to be a part of involved in good things that are
Yeah.
going on there. So I was impressed with that. And that was my sense too, but I'm not around them like you are. And that's why I wanted to.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids that have a lot of challenges, and we've that's no different really than it's been for the last 30 years that I've been doing this. That said, I've seen so many just feats of brilliance and selflessness, as I said a second ago, where kids are going out and helping others, a heart for helping others. I think that a lot of kids, more kids, in my humble opinion, are motivated by trying to do something that helps others with their life. Like they want to find a greater value in their vocation and in their future job. And I think that's a really good sign for the future. And we need this generation. The world needs this generation. So that's why
Yeah.
I do what I do, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. And now it seems to me these days, more college and professional athletes are speaking out boldly about their faith, on public microphones, on national television,
Mhm.
and newspaper articles. I don't know if that's more than ever, but to me, it seems like it. Maybe it's because I've become a Christian recently and it stands
Okay,
out to me. But I'm
sure.
wondering if you sense that too, and if that affects or has some power with the youth of today, the students of today.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, Rick. I don't know if it's any different than it's been. I think there's more, vehicles to share. There's, social media. There's,
Yeah.
just for you to get your voice heard is much easier than it used to be. That said, I hope you're right. I hope that there's just more people wanting to share about what's going on in their life and the impact that their faith is having. I think, we see so much negative in front of our, the click of a button. We see the worst thing happening all over the world, which is what helps lead to the mental health crisis that so many
Yeah.
people are going in.
Yeah.
That I feel like we need that other, we need the positive. we need the stories of how people are finding peace in their life. So I sure hope so. I think athletes have a platform. I think just as easily they can ruin it by their actions. We need people who are walking their talk.
Yeah.
and, are modeling the right things for sure.
Well, the book is great. I want you to tell me a little, who is it directed toward? Who would you like to have
Yeah.
in their hands, and what kind of impact are you hoping for?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the platform, certainly. I wrote the book to help people. That's where my heart's at. And like I said, people have struggled with this idea of being a bench player, not being the star, how to navigate that, and First Peter, we're reminded of how we're all given gifts. And with those gifts, we're asked to serve others. And I think I wrote this to try to help people figure out what that could look like very tangibly in a team context. So the audience is anybody that's on a team in any context, certainly a heavy leaning towards athletics. If you are somebody that is struggling coming off the bench right now, it's for you. If you're a coach or a leader who is trying to cultivate a team, and trying to find how to empower those non-star players of yours. If you're a parent and you have a child, and we see parents lose their minds because of playing time and not being the star. And I think we've all been guilty of that, and we're all missing it because we're removing the mountain and not teaching our kids to climb it. And there is such a gift that comes from adversity and from getting rid of the me and embracing the we. The book is for anybody who can relate to that, which I think is most of us.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us and just sharing your book and your life with us. It's been a pleasure, even from the moment that Bob Marshall. I was going to say Matthews, and I don't know why, but Bob introduced me to you. I knew that this was going to be a great conversation, and then you're a great guy. So thank you so much for spending time with us. I really appreciate it. We'll be praying for the success of the book, the success of your work there at Gig Harbor High School. And gosh, God bless you.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate you.
Take care. That was an inspiring look into the power of bench players to help shape the culture of a winning team. We just touched on the highlights of his book, Lessons from the Bench, from Brandon Bakke. It's a real treat to read. Great stories and real-life examples of how the 9 lessons from the bench can help out in leading whatever you're leading today. Buy it, read it, you'll love it. Thanks for your time, and God bless.